Hey friends, so today let's look at yet another amazing device, Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi is a single board computer, which means this board, which is maximum the size of an ATM card, contains everything you need for a real computer. The memory, a CPU and a GPU and more. It was started by an NGO in UK so that all kids could use computers to explore and learn. And the best part, we get to see all the components at a glance, all the connections, all the ports by just looking at it. There are many different versions of the Raspberry Pi. Here I have a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, but here we can also have a slightly smaller version, and this is a Raspberry Pi Zero W. So now let's get familiar with the Pi. Main component is a system on chip. It's an integrated circuit and it's very small, but it contains both the CPU and the GPU of this computer. Here we have a USB and Ethernet controller which just controls these ports. Then here we have four USB ports which we can use for connections to a keyboard, a mouse and more. Here we also have an Ethernet port so that we can connect our Raspberry Pi to wired networks. Next we have an audio jack here which we can just connect to a speaker or a headphone and it will play the sound. Here we have a connector which is looking very weird. You can just push in some wires into this and it can just connect, and this can be used to connect to the specially designed Raspberry Pi camera. Here we have an HDMI connector which can be used to connect to things like to our screens like TV or monitor, and then you can just see what's going on in our Pi. And here we have a micro USB port from which we have to provide 5 volts of power and we can make a Pi run. Next we have a display connector here which is like the camera connector, but it can be used to connect with the Raspberry Pi touch display. The camera connector and the display connector are also called CSI and DSI. And last, and then we also have an SD card connector here which we can just push in a micro SD card into it, and this small SD card, micro SD card or SD card in some cases, will store which will be the memory of our Raspberry Pi. It will store all the files we ever create plus the operating system which makes the Raspberry Pi run. Last but not the least, we have 40 GPIO pins here. These GPIO pins operate at 3.3 volts and we can use them to connect to LEDs, switches, buttons, almost all the hardware that we could connect, and we can build our own projects with these. This is also a very good thing about the Raspberry Pi, and there are only 40 here, and here there's a smaller group of just 2 header holes. They are just holes here which they are the run headers. They can be used to reset the Pi, and so that's it. Now let's flash the OS to our SD card and boot up the Pi for the first time. So now let's flash the OS onto our Raspberry Pi. So for this we'll have to just take out the SD card. Here we are using a micro SD card and we're going to flash the OS onto this. But my computer does not have a micro SD card slot, but it has an SD card slot. So I'll be using this adapter. And now I'll just plug this in. And now let's flash the image. So first we might need to download some software. So let's first download the Raspberry Pi operating system. We can get it from the Raspberry Pi official website. There's a Raspberry Pi OS, and we can just click on this download zip button and we can get a zip file, which is the OS. We will be using a tool called Balena Etcher or just Etcher to flash the image onto our SD card. I already have both the files installed because it takes a bit of time. So first we will run the exe file. We can get this exe file by clicking this button, or if you have a different operating system, you can see the different options here. Yeah, so now the Balena Etcher window is open. If you already have your SD card inserted, it might auto detect it, or else you can click on the change button or the select button to just browse and select your drive. We'll be clicking on the flash from file button here, and we'll select the file that you want. This is the Raspberry Pi image, and now let's get it. Right, yeah, now we have it. So all we need to do now is click on the flash button. In a few seconds it'll start flashing, and we'll have to wait for a bit of time so that it can flash completely. Now we have flashed the OS onto the SD card. Now it's loaded with the OS. So our Raspberry Pi is ready to boot up. Let's boot it up. So after we load the SD card with the operating system, we have to just push it into the SD card slot, and we can connect an HDMI screen to it from the HDMI port. It's already connected to my monitor, so that's the other end. But since you have to make configuration changes, we will also need to connect a keyboard or a mouse, a keyboard and mouse. I have a 2-in-1, so I'm just connecting both of them using one USB port. And we also need a power source. So I'm connecting this power bank to the power port here. And yes, the Raspberry Pi is all connected. Let me switch on the keyboard. Switch on my keyboard and let me power up my Raspberry Pi. Now it is booting, and now it has booted up, and this is the boot up picture, and now it will just show the screen in a few seconds, so we'll have to wait for it. And this is just a login message. I have no idea. And this is the preferences. This we'll just have to do some configuration changes here, so we can click on next. Here we can choose our country, and I'm currently in India, so let me choose India. Language I'll set to English, and then I'll just click on next. I have only one time zone option, so now this is just the screen preferences, so we'll just click on next. And now we'll have to connect to our network, so it will take some time to search for the networks, and in a few seconds all the available networks will come. You can just browse in the list for the network that we are using, so this is the one I'm using. And now I've typed in the password as well, so let me click on the next button, and now it is connecting to our wireless network. And now we have to see if we want to update the software, just to make sure that everything is up to date. So you can click on the next button, but now we'll have to restart this to just save the changes. So let's click on the restart button. Now it's rebooting. So now the same boot things will come, the 4 Raspberry icons, and then the pictures of the release. Then it'll just show what's happening in the corner, and then we'll just have to wait. In a few seconds the desktop will pop up again, and now it is here, and now we can start to use it. And we can click on this Raspberry icon to show all the applications. So we have many options here, and We can even code in Python. In fact, we can do wonders with a Pi. So in the next video, we will make a simple project. We'll make a simple project with the Raspberry Pi. Stay tuned. Bye.